The wind howled through the skeletal trees, rattling the frozen windows of the cabin like an angry spirit. Outside, the world was swallowed in white, a perfect, suffocating silence broken only by the occasional snap of a branch under some unseen weight. Inside, the heater hissed and coughed, its warmth failing to reach the shadows in the corners, where shapes seemed to linger longer than they should. She pulled her sweater tighter, fingers brushing against the cold metal of the old doorknob. The cabin had been empty for years, at least, that's what the owner had promised. But now, listening to the wind whistle through the gaps in the walls, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting just beyond the threshold. A faint thump echoed from the attic above. She froze. Footsteps. Something shifting. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat louder than the last. She told herself it was the wind, the snow settling, her imagination. And then came the whisper. Not a word, not a name, just a breathy, urgent hiss, so close it seemed to curl around her ear. "Don't look." Her eyes darted toward the staircase. The sound came again, closer this time, as if the cabin itself were warning her. And at that moment, the lights flickered and went out completely. She wasn't alone. The darkness was absolute, pressing against her from all sides. She fumbled for her phone, praying for a glow of light, but the battery blinked one last feeble bar before dying entirely. The wind outside rattled the windows, a shrill, irregular tapping that sounded almost like fingers drumming insistently. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath, but every inhale felt sharp, cold, as if the air itself were alive and judging her presence. Her name was Mara. She had rented the cabin as a quiet getaway, a solitary Christmas retreat to escape the city's noise, the family's expectations, the constant hum of life that left her restless and empty. Lonely, yes, but she had always thought solitude was safer than company. Now she wasn't so sure. She strained her ears, listening. The thump had returned, softer this time, deliberate. Something in the attic, or maybe the walls themselves, shifted, a whisper of movement that should have been impossible. The heater rattled again, shuddering, and she realized she could smell something faint, acrid, metallic, like iron bleeding through the cabin's wooden bones. Her stomach churned. "Hello." Her voice sounded small, swallowed immediately by the cavernous shadows. No reply, just the tapping, steady now, patient. Mara's eyes traced the room, the fireplace cold, empty bottles on the counter, the table's polished surface reflecting the faint moonlight through the frost-laced window. Nothing seemed out of place. Except everything felt wrong. She had read the rental listing carefully, had even called the owner to confirm the isolation. Yet the cabin now pressed upon her, alive with expectation, as if it had been waiting. She tried to reason, to remind herself it was late, nerves frayed, her imagination running wild. But reason faltered when a picture frame tipped slowly on the wall. No one had touched it. Slowly, it swayed back and forth, casting jagged shadows like skeletal fingers across the floor. She froze, stomach knotting. A faint sound of breathing came from behind the closed bathroom door. Shallow. Hesitant. She hadn't been in there. Her heart surged. Her feet were rooted, her mind screaming to move, but the sound was hypnotic, pressing closer with every heartbeat. Then a whisper again, low and deliberate, from somewhere she could not pinpoint. "You shouldn't be here." Mara's hand found the flashlight in the drawer. The click echoed loudly in the silence, and the thin beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the cabin in slices of trembling light. Dust motes floated like tiny specters, drifting in the beam. Her gaze fell on the staircase to the attic. Shadows pooled there, thick and unnatural. Her pulse raced as she saw it, or thought she saw it, a figure standing at the top, draped in darkness, motionless. She blinked. It vanished. Her rational mind screamed, "It's nothing, a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the furniture, the snow outside." But even as she told herself this, the cabin groaned. Wood creaked under weight that shouldn't exist. The air grew heavier, colder, as if the walls themselves were inhaling her fear. She forced herself to move toward the door, every step deliberate, every sound amplified in the tight space. But just as she reached the threshold, the doorknob rattled. Hard. From the outside. A slow, deliberate shaking, followed by a pause. Then a whispering laugh, high-pitched and hollow, like wind caught in broken glass. Mara stumbled back, her flashlight trembling in her hand. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to gather composure. Every instinct screamed to run, to flee the cabin and never return. But the snowstorm outside was merciless, swallowing any escape in white silence. She sank to the floor, shivering. The shadows seemed to gather around her, stretching, leaning closer, pressing against her mind. Thoughts collided. She shouldn't be alone, but she was. She shouldn't feel this weight, but she did. And then a single chilling thought drilled itself into her skull. She wasn't alone. Somewhere in the cabin, something waited, patient and unseen. It knew she was scared. It knew she was alone. And whatever it was, it would not let her leave. A loud thump upstairs, louder this time, deliberate. Not a branch falling, not a loose floorboard. Something heavy. Something moving. Something coming. Mara's breath caught in her throat. The beam of her flashlight wavered. And then, faintly from the darkness above, a voice, a human voice, strained and urgent, barely a whisper, said her name. Mara, come upstairs. The attic staircase groaned under weight she could not see. Mara's hand hovered over the railing, trembling. She wanted to retreat, to throw herself out into the snowstorm and run blindly into the white void. But the sound of footsteps above made her stomach twist with dread. They weren't fast, not running. They were methodical, patient, deliberate. Someone or something was waiting, observing, calculating. Her mind raced. She remembered the owner's words when she had booked the cabin. It's perfectly safe, just very isolated. Some say you feel watched, but that's just the wind and the old boards settling. At the time, the warning had seemed like quaint small-town superstition. Now, every whisper of the wind sounded like intent, every creak a message directed at her. Mara gripped the flashlight like a weapon, though she knew it would not protect her. Slowly, cautiously, she took the first step upward. Dust rose like smoke, catching the beam in tiny glimmers. The door at the top of the stairs was slightly ajar, as if waiting for her. She froze. The smell hit her again, a coppery metallic scent that made her stomach turn. It was stronger here, closer, concentrated. And then she saw it. A small notebook lay on the floor. Its leather cover cracked and worn, edges frayed. She knelt, heart pounding, and flipped it open. Pages filled with cramped handwriting, hasty and erratic, almost vibrating with fear. Do not go upstairs. They watch. They know your name. The cabin takes what is unguarded. The walls whisper, the floor breathes. Do not sleep. A chill swept her spine. Her pulse raced, every muscle taut. She wanted to close the book, throw it away, escape. But some morbid curiosity rooted her in place. She flipped further. Sketches of the attic, diagrams of the floorboards, circles around a corner near the far window. Scribbled notes warned of a presence that was patient, intelligent, waiting for moments of vulnerability. A soft sigh echoed from above. Mara's breath caught. She lifted her flashlight toward the ceiling, trying to pierce the darkness. Nothing. Then, tap, tap, tap. The window pane shook as if someone pressed a fingertip from the outside. But the storm was raging too violently. Snow slammed against the glass in chaotic torrents. The rhythm of the taps was too deliberate. Human. She swallowed hard, whispering to herself, I have to leave. I have to leave. Just pack, go, run. A whisper came from behind her. You can't. She spun, flashlight swinging. Nothing. The notebook lay open on the floor. Every instinct screamed to flee, but her legs refused to move. The air grew heavier, the shadows darker, stretching unnaturally along the walls. Then a sudden thump, directly behind her, low and heavy, like the floorboards were being pressed by a weight far larger than a human. Mara backed up, her back hitting the wall, flashlight illuminating only fractured shapes. And then, faintly, the whispering voices began. Soft, almost imperceptible at first, overlapping, like someone repeating words she couldn't fully catch. Leave, leave, don't sleep, Mara. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor, clutching the notebook, shaking violently. She was alone, or at least she should be. The storm outside seemed to falter, an eerie pause. Silence. Not comforting, ominous. The cabin itself seemed to inhale. Then, without warning, a loud crack echoed from the fireplace. The metal grate tipped forward, spilling ashes across the floor. The shadows it cast flickered, forming shapes, figures that weren't there a moment ago. They lingered long enough for her mind to register faces. Grinning, hollow-eyed, staring, then vanished when she blinked. A memory surfaced unbidden. The story her grandmother told her as a child about a cursed cabin in the woods. No one believed her then, but this was exactly like that story. Mara's mind began to fracture under the weight of unease. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light became a threat. She thought she heard footsteps circling behind her, soft and deliberate. She thought she saw a shape at the corner of her eye, tall, dark, almost humanoid, vanishing when she turned. Every rational explanation failed. She was no longer a visitor, she was prey. The notebook slipped from her hands. Its pages splayed open on the floor, and the words seemed to change before her eyes. They are inside. They know your fear. You cannot leave. Not tonight. Mara's voice cracked as she whispered. Who is there? No reply. Only silence. The kind of silence that pressed on the eardrums, filling every space, twisting her thoughts. And then, a door upstairs creaked open. She could not see the top of the stairs, but a faint light flickered, as if a candle had been lit. Slowly, deliberately, it moved toward her. No wind carried it. No candle could flicker so steadily in a storm. It advanced in a pattern, slow and inevitable, as if guided by intelligence. Mara's thoughts fractured. Memories of past Christmas nights alone in her apartment flashed. The subtle feeling of being watched, the creaking of floorboards, shadows shifting. All trivial then, but now prescient. Every warning, every instinct, pointed to the same truth. The cabin was alive, and it remembered every visitor. It was hungry for fear. A soft, mocking giggle echoed from the shadows near the fireplace. She froze. It wasn't childish. Hollow, echoing, as though the sound came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Her body refused to obey her commands to move, her mind looping through impossible thoughts. Am I dreaming? Is this real? Am I going insane? And then she remembered the notebook's warning. They know your name. They watch your fear. They wait for weakness. Weakness. She felt it now, every second building it. Nausea, trembling, mind spinning. And then came the voice, a whisper low, urgent, impossibly close, curling around her ear. Stand, or join them. The lights flickered. For a moment she saw them. Faces pressed against the windows, pale and grinning. Shadows stretched from corners, rising, leaning closer, merging into tall, shifting forms that seemed to breathe. Some wore familiar masks, faces of people long gone, neighbors, strangers she couldn't place. Yet their eyes were hollow, and they smiled knowing she could see them. Her rational mind screamed for escape, for sanity, for daylight, for anything. But the cabin had swallowed it all. Every exit was a suggestion, not a reality. The snowstorm raged outside. The doors were just wood and hinges, waiting to open themselves at the will of something. She stumbled backward toward the fireplace, tripping over a loose floorboard, and the notebook flew open. A final line glared at her. The lonely are easy. A cold hand brushed her shoulder. Mara screamed. No one was there. Or maybe they always had been. For the rest of the night, the cabin whispered and shifted. Every creak, every sigh of wind through the broken boards, every flicker of light and shadow, every faint scent of copper and decay, told her one thing: she was not alone. And the longer she stayed, the less certain she became that she had ever been truly alive outside its walls. By dawn, exhaustion had dulled her terror only slightly. The storm outside eased, light filtering through the frost-covered windows. The cabin seemed quieter still, but not empty. Mara knew, deep in her bones, that the night had changed her, and whatever dwelled here had marked her as prey. She backed into a corner, clutching the notebook, staring at the staircase to the attic. For hours, or maybe minutes, time no longer mattered. She waited, listening to the silence, every nerve screaming. Every instinct whispered. It was coming again. And she knew, with a certainty that felt like ice in her veins, that whatever waited in the shadows was patient, eternal. The attic door groaned as it slowly opened, the hinges whining in protest or warning. Mara's flashlight trembled in her hands, its beam weak against the dense, oppressive darkness above. She should have run, thrown herself out into the storm, done anything, but her body refused. Her mind had fractured too far. Fear had tethered her in place, and now curiosity or madness pulled her upward. Every step creaked beneath her weight. Dust fell from the ceiling like gray snow. Shadows shifted along the walls, pooling in unnatural shapes. She swore she saw faces staring at her from corners. Twisted smiles pressed against warped wooden beams. They were everywhere, watching, waiting. The air was thick with the coppery scent of blood. Her stomach churned, nausea clawing at her throat. She pressed onward. At the top of the stairs, the attic stretched wide, its far end swallowed in shadow. Moonlight filtered through a broken window, illuminating motes of dust that danced like restless spirits. But it wasn't the dust that drew her eye. It was the figure standing in the center of the room. Tall, dark, shifting, almost human but not quite. Its face was hidden in shadow, yet she could feel its gaze burning into her chest. The air around it shimmered with cold, unnatural energy. "You shouldn't have come," it whispered, voice rasping like wind through dead trees. "They warned you. You ignored them." Mara swallowed, shaking. Who are you?" The figure's head tilted, ever so slightly. The shadow seemed to pulse, breathing in time with her racing heart. Then came the sound, the laughter. Hollow, layered, echoing, a choir of voices from nowhere and everywhere. Some sounded familiar. Neighbors, strangers, even her own grandmother. The notes crawled under her skin, turning her bones to ice. "They are patient," it said. "They know your fear. They feed on it. You cannot leave." The floorboards beneath her groaned, though she hadn't moved. The walls seemed to contract and stretch, bending subtly as if alive. The shadows reached toward her, tendrils of darkness snaking across the floor, licking at her ankles. Mara's flashlight flickered violently. She screamed. The figure moved then, swift, impossibly fast. Not running, not walking, sliding, gliding, a black smear against the moonlit boards. It circled her, the shadows twisting with it. She backed into the corner, heart hammering. "I don't understand," she choked out. "Do you want to?" The figure asked, tilting its head. "They will show you." The attic shifted around her. Familiar objects, boxes, crates, furniture, began to warp and stretch, taking grotesque, impossible shapes. A rocking chair swung gently though no breeze stirred it. A mirror reflected not her face, but a hollow-eyed version of herself, mouth open in a silent scream. "Stop it, please," she whimpered. "Stop what?" The figure whispered, voice curling like smoke. "The fear is yours. You invited it. They are inside you now." From the shadows, more forms emerged. Faces pressed from the walls, grotesque and familiar. One was the neighbor who had once smiled at her from across the street, now hollow, grinning. Another, a childhood friend long dead, eyes black voids, mouth stretched unnaturally. They advanced slowly, deliberately. Mara stumbled backward. "No, no, leave me alone." The figure raised a hand. Shadows surged, reaching into her mind, touching her memories. Pain flashed. Christmas mornings with family. Laughter now hollowed by the storm, the loneliness she had ignored. Every memory twisted into fear, every moment of weakness magnified. "They are inside me," she gasped. "They were always inside," the shadow whispered. "Lonely hearts are easy." Mara screamed again, spinning, trying to escape, but the attic had no exit. The window showed nothing but snow and storm. The staircase behind her stretched impossibly long, vanishing into darkness. Every exit led only deeper into the cabin's embrace. She felt hands, cold, impossible, press on her shoulders, her arms, her back. She swung, trying to break free. Screams erupted around her, disembodied, overlapping, echoing through the room. They were her own voice, and yet not. A sudden whisper sliced through the chaos. "Join us." Her mind fought, clawed, refused to bend completely. She grabbed the flashlight, swinging it at the nearest figure. Shadows recoiled, hissing like scalding steam. The beam caught the tall main figure. It shimmered, humanoid but wrong, face ever shifting, a void filled with grinning mouths. "Why are you doing this?" she screamed. "Because fear is fuel. Because they are patient. Because you asked for it," the shadow replied, voice folding into itself. "You came alone. You ignored warnings. And now..." It stepped forward. Shadows surged, curling around her like serpents. Mara's vision blurred. The world seemed to tilt, walls bending in impossible angles. Time slowed and then sped, collapsing into a single endless moment. She felt herself breaking. And then the whispers became voices. Voices of the past, present, and those who never were. "Sleep. Stay. Forever." Mara's hands clawed at the walls at nothing, trying to anchor herself to reality. Her legs gave way. She fell to the floor, curling into herself. The shadows enveloped her, pressing cold, sharp, unyielding. A single voice cut through everything, clear, human, intimate. "Mara, come upstairs." She froze. Her own voice, yet older, hollowed, familiar. She realized it was the voice from the notebook, from the warnings, from all the Christmas nights she had feared alone. "I won't," she whispered, though it came out trembling. The figure leaned closer. "It is inevitable." Her vision narrowed. Shapes danced at the edge of her sight, faces pressing in, smiles stretching wider than humanly possible. She wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But the weight of the cabin pressed on her chest. Every breath became a struggle, every heartbeat a hammer against her skull. And then, the final moment. The shadows merged, forming a towering, impossibly vast figure, swallowing the attic ceiling, stretching into the walls, consuming the light. It spoke not with words, but with thought, curling around her mind, pressing in, echoing in her bones. "You cannot leave. You were never meant to." Mara's hands went limp. Her flashlight fell, rolling across the warped floorboards. Its light flickered and died. Darkness claimed her completely, a living, sentient void that wrapped around every nerve, every sense. And yet, amid the suffocating shadows, she felt watching. Eyes everywhere. Not just the entity, but the cabin itself, alive, patient. Every heartbeat a reminder. She was marked. She was alone. She was trapped. 4 hours, minutes, or perhaps eternities. She felt the cabin breathing, pulsing, whispering. The figure lingered, a constant presence at the edge of her mind. She had survived the night, physically, but the terror had claimed her soul. The snowstorm outside waned, sunlight filtering faintly through frost-covered windows. Yet the attic remained a place of shadows, and Mara's mind had fractured into 1,000 pieces. Every familiar object now held the potential for horror. Every sound promised a whisper. Every shadow hid intent. She could not leave. She could not wake. She could not be alone. The entity, patient and eternal, receded only slightly, letting her breathe, but never letting her go. And in the distance she heard it again, the soft, chilling laugh, a whisper carried through wood and air, bending reality itself. "Merry Christmas, Mara." The morning light filtered weakly through the frost-stained windows, painting the cabin in a pale, cold glow. The storm had passed, leaving a suffocating silence in its wake. Snow drifted against the walls like untouched memories, but inside, the air still trembled with echoes of the night. Mara sat on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the attic door. It no longer seemed threatening, but it did not seem empty either. Something lingered. Always had, always would. Her hands shook as she reached for the notebook. The leather cover felt colder now, almost icy, as if the book had absorbed the cabin's essence overnight. She opened it. The pages were blank. Every warning, every frantic scribble erased, as if the cabin had decided the night had concluded, that the memory belonged solely to it. She closed it slowly. Her fingers lingered on the spine, feeling the pulsing chill beneath the surface. She could no longer trust the room, could no longer trust her own eyes, her own thoughts. Every shadow might be waiting. Every whisper might be speaking her name. Mara rose unsteadily. She traced the walls, touching the frozen window panes, listening. The silence pressed on her eardrums. Not comforting, but threatening, alive. Every creak of the wood underfoot sounded deliberate. She realized with a sinking weight that the cabin had marked her. Not physically, but spiritually. Some part of her belonged here now, tethered in ways she could neither explain nor escape. Outside, the forest glittered under fresh snow. Sunlight reflected off the icy branches. Innocent, serene. But Mara saw only the remnants of what had occurred. Shadows lingered at the edges of her vision, moving just beyond the light. The world felt unreal, stretched and distorted by the terror she had endured. Even daylight seemed a threat, fragile and temporary. Her phone lay on the counter. Battery dead. Signal non-existent. She considered calling for help but knew it would change nothing. Help could not reach her. And if anyone arrived, they would see the cabin as it appeared now. Silent, still, and ordinary. The horrors of the night belonged only to her, and to the cabin. Mara walked slowly through the rooms. Every object seemed subtly altered. The fireplace grate tilted just slightly. A rocking chair creaked, though no breeze moved it. The shadows in the corners shifted when she passed, merging and retreating with deliberate intelligence. She realized that even in the absence of the entity, the cabin had absorbed part of her fear, reshaping itself in response. She sat back in the living room, exhausted, mind fraying. Memories of the night floated in her head, fragmented and overlapping. Faces, whispers, shadows, some real, some imagined, melded into a continuous oppressive presence. She could not separate herself from the experience. She had survived, but survival felt like a hollow victory. Part of her had been claimed, and the knowledge of that claim pressed down with unyielding weight. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time no longer mattered. The attic remained silent, yet she felt the same unblinking attention, as if eyes, human inhuman, somewhere in between, followed her. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat reminded her. The cabin did not forgive. It only waited. Patient. Eternal. Her mind sought rationalization. Perhaps it had been a hallucination, stress, isolation, snow-induced delirium. Perhaps. But she knew better. Every instinct, every shiver down her spine, every subtle shift in the shadows whispered the same truth. It had been real. And part of her had been left behind. Mara tried to sleep. She curled under a thin blanket on the sofa, exhaustion threatening to pull her under. But sleep was impossible. Every corner of the room shifted in her mind's eye. Shadows lengthened in impossible directions. She imagined whispers at her ear, hissing threats she could barely understand. When dawn came fully, pale and unrelenting, she had not rested. She could not. She rose, packed some belongings. Every movement was deliberate, careful, as if the cabin itself watched, catalogued, and judged her. She wanted to leave, to step into the world outside, where the snow sparkled and the air was untainted. But the door felt heavier now, as if resisting her, the threshold no longer a simple barrier of wood and metal. When she opened it, the forest welcomed her with silent indifference. No eyes watched, no voices called. Yet she felt the weight of what had occurred pressing in behind her, tethered by invisible threads. She stepped onto the snow, leaving faint footprints, yet felt no relief. The cabin loomed behind her, innocuous, still, normal to anyone else, but she knew it had absorbed part of her. She would always carry it. Mara walked away, but every instinct whispered that she could not escape, that some part of the cabin's shadow had entered her, would follow her through every quiet night, every lonely moment. She would hear the whispers in empty rooms, feel the brush of shadows against her skin when no one was there, and see the faint, impossible flicker of forms in her peripheral vision. Days passed. She returned to work, to family, to the routines she had once found comforting. But every Christmas night, every flicker of light, every whisper of wind through a crack, brought the memory rushing back. The terror was no longer confined to the cabin. It had become part of her perception, her awareness, her very self. Mara tried to speak of it, tried to tell someone. The words felt hollow, meaningless. Friends and colleagues smiled politely, nodded, offered comfort. They did not hear the whispers. They did not feel the weight of the shadow pressing on the edge of thought. They were not marked. Only she was. Years later she would return. Curiosity, guilt, madness, she could not distinguish which, to the outskirts of the forest. She would stand at the edge of the snow, look at the cabin in the distance, and know that it was still there. Waiting. Patient. Eternal. And she would feel it calling her name, softly, irresistibly. Mara. Come inside. Come home. And she would not go. Not yet. But the pull would never leave her. The fear, the memory, the part of her that had been claimed by that night in the lonely cabin. They were eternal, stitched into the marrow of her bones. The world outside continued, indifferent. Life went on. But Mara's life had been altered forever. She had survived the night. But survival had a price. The cabin had marked her, and its shadow would never release her. Even now, in the quiet of her apartment, she senses it. A faint draft brushes her neck. A shadow stretches where none should be. A whisper curls around her ear. You can't leave. You never will. And she knows it is true. Because some horrors once encountered are eternal.